Right. Good evening from London, and hello from me, Dr. Dermot Hudson, the chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea, chairman of the Korean Friendship Association of the UK, and the official delegate of KFA UK, and of course, the owner of this very self-same channel, Songun007, of a militant voice of Songum and Juche in the UK, and also the only pro DPRK, pro Juche YouTube channel in the UK. And this is our 26th live stream that we're broadcasting. And welcome to everybody who's just joined. I will talk for a bit. I'm not making a formal presentation. I just got a few notes, going to speak about a couple of different subjects, and then I will take questions from the chat, and we will wind up around 8 o'clock, 2000 hours tonight. And yeah, it's been quite a few things happening that I can speak about. I've got a few subjects lined up to talk about tonight. But first of all, something curious happens this week, and that was I got two different approaches from the South Korean puppet regime. Yes, the South Korean puppet regime tried to contact me. First of all, I got contacted through Facebook from someone describing themselves as a researcher for the South Korean Peaceful Reunification Institute, and they actually invited me to South Korea. And then I got contacted by an individual with a British name who said they were a researcher, a political researcher at the South Korean Puppet Embassy in London, and invited me to go to the South Korean Puppet Embassy, apparently to discuss my visit to the DPRK, which was now nearly 18 months ago. It was last year in April 2024, but they wanted to discuss it now. I told them I was not interested in such a meeting and not to contact me again. And I would make it very clear through this live stream that on no account would I ever travel to South Korea or have any meeting with the South Korean Puppet Embassy. South Korea is a fascist state. It is a colony of US imperialism, and it is a total puppet regime, and it is, well, it is a place that is total rubbish and should not exist. The only true Korea is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, People's Korea. And indeed, Marshal Kim Jong Un himself said of South Korea, and I quote, "South Korea at present is nothing but a hemiplegic malformation and a colonial subordinate state whose politics is completely out of order. The whole society tainted by Yankee culture and defense and security totally dependent on the US," end of quote. And I think that totally sums it up. And Comrade Kim Jong, a Vice Department Director of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, and I will be talking about her two statements in a bit, also said of the South Korean puppets. The South Korean puppets are unchanging enemy and the fundamental factor that determines the victory or defeat of the revolutionary struggle is class consciousness, end of quote. And again, I mean, this theme of class consciousness and class education is something that I will be returning to later in the course of the live stream. Now, the fact that this approach was made to me is proof, is evidence of the dirty tricks that the South Korean puppets play. They try to take supporters and friends away from the DPRK by offering them money, offering them all kinds of things. And this has been going on for years and years and years. And I can tell you, there was a case of a general secretary of a communist party here in the UK who was suddenly phoned up, and the person said he was the cultural attaché of the South Korean embassy, and he was offered a trip to South Korea with all expenses paid and all kinds of things. And I was told, well, again by people in the know, that in the early 1990s, various Labour MPs and trade union figures from the UK were invited to South Korea and were given Hyundai cars and Rolex watches. And this is one of the reasons for the anti DPRK propaganda, is that South Korea has got a network of anti-DPRK propaganda hacks, different politicians, journalists, and so-called academics who are on their payroll or have been bribed by them. Naming names, you got people like Lankov, you got the awful B.R. Myers, whose books are complete lies and fabrications, and there's a massive lie machine created by South Korean. This is how they do it, and it might sound very innocent. They might invite people to the South Korean embassy for a chat or something, but this is how these things start. It's a thin end of a wedge. So, I mean, I would not visit South Korea, and I would never go to the South Korean puppet embassy. I'm not going to let these people try to buy me and turn me against the DPRK. I'm just seeing questions coming up. I was going to sort of answer them at the end. But yeah, I mean, as far as I know, the arch of reunification has been demolished. But anyway, so I mean, back to the main topics. Say, I will not be bought by the South Korean puppets. I would never visit South Korea. The only time I would ever consider visiting South Korea is if the flag of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea was again flying over Seoul and Busan and Daejeon. But I would never visit fascist South Korea, which is a totally decadent Yankee colony. Right, this brings me neatly on to the next topic, in that there have been very important developments this week. Of course, on Sunday, it was the 72nd anniversary of the victory in the Great Fatherland Liberation War. And then there were two very important statements by Comrade Kim Jong, Vice Department Director of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea. And in the first statement on Monday, the 28th of July, she rejected engagement or talks with the South Korean puppets. And she made a very significant statement. I'm going to read out parts of it. And she said, and I quote, "We do not care who is elected president or what policy is being pursued in the ROK, that is South Korea, and therefore have not made any assessment of it so far. But I'm going to make our stand clear. As for the suspension of the anti-DPRK psychological propaganda broadcasting, which the ROK authorities described as the first signal for the restoration of confidence between the South and the North, all this is a scourge that have voluntarily invited, and thus it is an issue of themselves, no matter how they settle it, and is nothing but a irreversible turning back of what they should not have done in the first place." End of quotation. And I think that's a very important remark. Yeah, it was something that the puppets should have never started. It's not the fact they've ended it. It's not a favour to the DPRK. They merely doing the right thing. It's like not beating someone up and then saying you've done them a favour by not beating them up. And I think what is very worthy of note is that Comrade Kim Jong points out that they can reverse it anyway. They can go back to making the broadcasts and other activities like scattering leaflets. And she continues, and I quote, "The DPRK could reach a very important historical conclusion that they are okay whether it advocates democracy or assumes the mask of conservativeness, can never be the partner of reconciliation and cooperation, and throw away the preconceived idea contradictory to the reality after breaking away with a very tired and uncomfortable history fettered by the rhetorical expression of fellow countrymen. We can confirm once again the true nature of the ROK politician, who is surely enslaved to the departed spirit of reunification by absorption, cannot be changed, as the fact shows that he has set the task of the times set as a task of the times the normal operation of the Ministry of Reunification that must be resolved along with the reality in which state-to-state relations are permanently fixed on the Korean Peninsula. She also makes the point that the present South Korean regime is committed to the so-called ROK US alliance. In other words, it wants to continue with the puppet status of South Korea, continue with the occupation of American troops in South Korea. No change in that. And I think the statement of Comrade Kim Jong reflects the DPRK's policy on inter-Korean relations that was adopted at the end of 2023, and I feel it is a very correct one. Because in South Korea, you have a puppet regime with puppet structures. It's really all really controlled by the Americans. And you've got a system where you got different factions and tendencies, but they all represent the same thing. South Korea can wear a liberal face, it can wear a trendy face, or it can or it can wear a fascist face. But both are two sides of the same coin. I nearly was going to use a rather rude and vulgar expression that George Galloway likes to use about two of the same something, but I thought I wouldn't do. I mean, but that's what you got in South Korea, and they may differ in regard to tactics and nuances and approaches, but both have got the same aim of destroying the socialist system in the DPRK and achieving unification through absorption. Say the Liberals favour softening up and dialogue and exchange and all this kind of thing, whereas the fascists or conservatives in South Korea favour the very tight ideological confrontation, and not just an ideological confrontation, but a physical confrontation as well, through military pressure. But the aim is the same, just different routes to achieving that. And then on the 29th of July, Comrade Kim Jong responded to the rumours of talks between the DPRK and the US, and the statement was titled "The Contact Between the DPRK and the US is only a hope of the US," and basically said that the DPRK would not sit down with the US to discuss denuclearization. There would be no talk about denuclearization. And Comrade Kim Jong in a statement said the recognition and irreversible position of the DPRK as a nuclear weapons state, and the hard fact that its capabilities and geopolitical environment have radically changed, should be a prerequisite for predicting and thinking everything in the future. No one can deny the reality and should not misunderstand. And she made the point I think, a wonderful point, but very basic point. It is worth taking into account the fact that the year 2025 is neither 2018 nor 2019. I really like that. And the thing is, the DPRK's nuclear status is now in the Constitution. It's part of the fundamental law of the state. So there can be no discussion or bargaining about the DPRK's nuclear weapons. It's impossible. I mean, and if the US really wants talks with the DPRK, then it should use a totally different approach. It should not seek denuclearization, which is really a code word for regime change. By denuclearization, what they really mean is decommunization and desocialization, overthrowing the socialist system in the DPRK. So Comrade Kim Jong, in a statement, has made it very clear that the DPRK will not talk with the US about denuclearization. And Comrade Kim Jong, in the statement, she concludes, if the US fails to accept the changed reality and persists in the failed past, the DPRK US meeting will remain as a hope of the US side. And just to backtrack a little bit to what I was saying earlier about South Korea, particularly under the new liberal regime, but I think it also applies to the US. These kind of offers of talks and dialogue, they are a trick. They're trying to lure the DPRK into a trap. They're trying to make the DPRK give up its socialist system. And I think one can recall a very ancient fable. I believe it might have come from Greek mythology, or possibly I'm wrong, but there is a story about the sun and the wind one day decided to have a contest. You might have even had a bet, but the object of the contest was a traveller wearing a very thick cloak, and the aim was to see who could make the traveller take off the cloak. So the wind blew and blew, but all that happened was the traveller pulled the cloak tighter around himself and would not let go of it. However, the sun just shone and shone, and it got warmer and warmer. So the traveller took the cloak off, and that is the very essence of the so-called sunshine policy advocated by the South Korean puppets, which began back in 1998. They're aiming to try and lure the DPRK into dropping its guard, lure it into opening up, into restoring capitalism in the DPRK. That is the aim of the South Korean puppets, and the US aim is very similar, only the US are making denuclearization a prerequisite for this, because the DPRK have the most astute and intelligent leadership in the world, and they realize what happened in Libya and Iraq, particularly Libya, where the Libyans gave up their very rudimentary nuclear program that was in its infancy, and shipped it back, actually shipped it over to the USA. DPRK would not do that, would not go down that route. But also the approaches of the US imperialists, when they say they want talks and dialogue, what they want is to try and induce the DPRK into reform and opening up, into restoring capitalism. And they did this with the old socialist countries in the past. With the Soviet Union, with the former German Democratic Republic, with Hungary, Poland, and Yugoslavia, all those countries, the US imperialists used this tactic. And I think it was very significant that in the run-up to Fatherland Liberation War Victory Day on the July 27th, that on the 24th of July, Marshal Kim Jong Un himself visited the Sinchon Class Education Center, which used to be known as the Sinchon Museum. And during the visit, he met the honorary curator of the center, who was a massacre survivor. And of course, this was the place where the Yankees and class enemies killed 35,383 people. And I've been there 5 times. I've been 3 times to the old museum and twice to the new museum, or as it's now known as the Class Education Center. And Marshal Kim Jong Un gave very significant teachings to, saying that DPRK must step up anti-imperialist, anti-US education, and it's a very key task. And of course, Marshal Kim Jong Un himself had visited this museum several times. He'd actually visited it in 1998, and he also visited in 2014. And it was in 2014 he called for the rebuilding and remodeling of the museum. So it was all moved onto one site. Previously, it had been spread over 2 different sites. One part of the museum was in the town of Sinchon, and the other part was at the site where 400 mothers and 102 children were killed by the Americans. And now it's all on one site. It's by the tombs of the mothers and children. And Marshal Kim Jong Un visited the new museum when it was opened in July 2015. And at that time, he gave teachings on anti-US class education. And he said, US imperialism is the arch-villain of aggression, which came into being and got fattened with aggression and plundering. Its nature and brutality as an aggressor remain unchanged forever. And if there is any change today, it has become more insidious and crafty in a method to satisfy its greed for aggression. To intensify the class education is more urgent today when the younger generation who have experienced neither exploitation and oppression nor the stern trials of war have emerged as the driving force of the revolution. The class education should not be delayed or neglected for a moment. Though time passes and generations are replaced, it should be intensified in depth and on a permanent basis. Just as a fish cannot live without water, it is impossible to think about the sovereign life of our people and dignity and value of human beings without anti-imperialist, anti-US education and class education, end of quotation. And he sort of said, say, very similar things today. And he'd also described the US imperialists as cannibals, which I think is quite appropriate. But I think the visit to the Sinchon Class Education Centre was significant, as it really was a sort of implicit rejection of talks or dialogue with the US. And it also shows the DPRK is a very militant, revolutionary, anti-imperialist state and a revolutionary socialist country. I think it's the only country in the world that's carrying out this kind of deep anti-American, anti-imperialist education. Other countries are not doing it. So, I mean, bravo to the DPRK. In the past, and I witnessed this with my very own eyes, former revisionist-led socialist countries did not carry out anti-imperialist education. In Hungary, I even saw McDonald's, I saw Madonna posters on sale, even posters for Rambo, which is an incredibly anti-communist and racist American film. They were letting all sorts of trash in. I applaud the DPRK's stance on this. And the last subject I want to talk about is human rights violations in the imperialist world, and partly because in the last live stream there was a comment about my own case a few years ago, well, about 11 years ago, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. Instead, I'm going to talk about some other examples first. And if people saw the video I did for the Points News channel, which is a small independent media channel, people will learn that the Communist Party of Czechoslovakia, it's the Communist Party of Bohemia and Moravia in the Czech Republic has been banned. Yes, it's been banned. And it's shocking that that's happened in a former socialist country. And it is also the case that the Communist Party in Poland is virtually banned, and a young Polish communist has been put in jail. And also the Communist Party is banned in the Baltic states, which like Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, which are all fascist countries. And of course, dare we mention it, of course, Ukraine, because bans the Communist Party, though this is meant to be a wonderful liberal democracy that our taxpayers' money has been wasted on. that huge sums of money have been thrown at Ukraine at a time when we've got severe economic problems in the UK, with a budgetary deficit and huge spending cuts being made all the time, huge cuts to housing, huge cuts to disability benefits. But this money is being given to this regime that bans communist parties, and of course, perhaps the most famous example of repression of communist parties is South Korea, another fascist state which has the national security law, where you can be jailed for 7 years for expressing sympathy for the DPRK or communist ideas, or you can actually be executed. And it's worth recalling that South Korean communists like Kim Jong Un and Choi Yong-do were executed by the South Korean puppets, as were the leaders of the People's Revolutionary Party and the Strategic Liberation Party. But the liberals won't tell you about this, nor will all the academics who are taking money from South Korea, who are married to South Korean women. They won't tell you about that. And of course, one other country where the Communist Party is banned is Indonesia, but I don't know a lot about contemporary Indonesia. Yes, I know all about 1965. I don't know very much about contemporary Indonesia. So that's an example of human rights violations in the capitalist world. And it's even going on in the imperialist countries. And I would like to mention the case of Alex Dillard, who used to be our KFA USA representative in the United States, and also a member of the American Communist Party. Now, I'm not advocating support for the American Communist Party. I'm merely pointing out that there's been repression directed against that party, and Alex Dillard was arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and he had his laptop and phone confiscated, and he is facing charges. And this shows what a load of rubbish it is when they talk about freedom and human rights in the capitalist world, because there is increasing repression of dissent. And lastly, with my own case, someone, as I say, did ask for me to explain it. Well, without trying to summarize it, I've been KFA UK official delegate and chairman of KFA since 2001. I'd been employed by the Valuation Office Agency. Had been employed since 1989. There'd never been any problem with my views, but all of a sudden, there was a newspaper article. The employer was named, and I was called in for several interviews, including a 3-hour-long interrogation, lots of hearings, and I was accused of serious misconduct, given a final warning, and told to leave KFA. Yes, to leave KFA. And they told me that holding a position in KFA was not compatible with employment at any level in the UK civil service. So if if I, you know, if you were like a tea person, I nearly said tea boy, but that's maybe sexist. But if you were a tea person or a messenger or a cleaner, you couldn't be hold a KFA position. I mean, it's totally ridiculous, but I mean, it's how they suppress dissent and how they stop support for the DPRK. Anyway, I've spoken for a very long time. I'm just going to scroll up through the chat and reply to a few questions. I'm scheduled to finish at 8 o'clock. Free Palestine, yes, totally agree. And I've been on several Palestine marches. Long live DPRK Palestine friendship. Yes, long live DPRK Palestine friendship. And I would just point out here that the UK government is talking about recognising Palestine with a lot of conditions attached to it. But do you know, in fact, the DPRK recognised Palestine in April 1966, 59 years ago. And you know, the UK is still differing whether to recognise Palestine. Right, try and answer a few of these questions. Yes, good evening, Von Libertaire. I hope I said that right. Well, with regard to the question about young people in the ROK, it's hard to know what they do really think because it is a fascist state, but certainly there is a lot of US cultural imperialism there. I think we answered the question about the Arch of Reunification. Yes, that had gone. I didn't see it there when I was there in April 2024. Well, I mean, username. You're clearly a South Korean troll. You're clearly a South Korean agent. Yeah, the US by occupying South Korea, that's a provocation in itself. The US should not be there in the first place. And you know, if they, you know, the US is worried about its troops being threatened, well, don't put them there in the first place. You know, don't have a huge global empire of military bases. You know, how many military bases does the US have in South Korea? How many does it have throughout the world? And in fact, the US on several occasions, I believe 7 different occasions, like the Pueblo incident, like the Panmunjom incident, actually threatened the use of nuclear weapons against the DPRK. And during the Fatherland Liberation War, which is known as the Korean War in the West, the US threatened the use of nuclear weapons against the DPRK and used biological and chemical weapons against the DPRK, causing losses. And the DPRK doesn't regularly violate agreements. I mean, you must be a South Korean saying things. Well, the DPRK did suspend missile tests for a time. You've got a selective memory, and also there's been no DPRK nuclear test since 2017. So I don't know what you're complaining about. Maybe they should have one very soon. Well, 2000 was now 25 years ago. I mean, at the time, like a lot of friends of people's career, I saw it as a positive development leading to which should have led to peace on the Korean Peninsula. I mean, I did have some doubts at the time because of the US occupation of South Korea. You know, I wondered how things could work out with the US occupying South Korea. And I think for these, you know, for things to have worked out, the US should have totally withdrawn from South Korea. But the South Korean rulers showed themselves to be totally spineless. They could have demanded the pullout of US forces from South Korea, but they didn't. They were both spineless and two-faced. And this is why the DPRK came to the decision at the end of 2023. They would no longer pursue reunification, or at least through agreements with those in power in South Korea, because it was just useless. Well, again, a username. You're obviously a South Korean troll, because this is a complete slander, and you can read my article on the Kuala Lumpur conspiracy against people's Korea. Well, yeah, I mean, maybe you know, but we re-Ukraine. I mean, yeah, I doubt if the ordinary Ukrainian workers, the oppressed people in Ukraine, would see the money. But I'm sure the cocaine clown Zelensky has seen a lot of the money, and he's pocketing a lot. What I was trying to say is that British taxpayers' money should not be used to prop up a fascist regime like Ukraine, which bans communist parties. And the same could be said about South Korea. No British taxpayers' money should be used to prop up South Korea. And there should be no British warships in South Korea. People don't realise that a British warship is heading for South Korea now to take part in exercises which our friendly South Korean troll thinks are not happening. Yes, I know that there's two usernames. Well, I mean that's he's answering no, trying. Yes, greetings, George. Well, it's you know, two people have said the same thing, which I think is a little suspect. But anyway, or maybe people are copying and pasting. It's absolutely not true that there's no criticism allowed. There's actually the law of complaints and petitions in the DPRK, and officials are criticised all the time. And respected Marshal Kim Jong Un has taken many measures to root out bureaucracy and the abuse of power. And as for the electoral process in the DPRK, candidates are selected through mass meetings. Candidates without the support of the people cannot go through on to the ballots, and people can actually now vote against the list. Yes, I mean, usually elections in the DPRK are held every 5 years, but, you know, uh, these there may be occasions when these are extended, and I think because of the massive, rural construction program and the 20 by 20, program, you know, they've, extended the, term of the current Supreme People's Assembly. I know one or two words of Korean, like Chonsan Mansei, Chonsan Imangun Mansei, and also things like Kamsanada. Right. I have a light question regarding transport. What kind of car brands, models, and quantity of cars is there in the DPRK when you visited the last time? Ah, well, you're really asking the wrong person, because I've never driven, never owned uh, a car. So one car looks pretty much like another to me, but I will try using my limited knowledge of the motor trade or the car industry. Basically, yeah, contrary to propaganda myths about the DPRK, I did see many cars on the roads, even lines of traffic in different places. As to different kinds, there is the DPRK's own domestic car producer, the Peace Motors Corporation, or Pyongyang Motor Corporation, which has diversified considerably and produces a range of cars. So many of the cars I saw were actually made in the DPRK, and you have foreign cars like Mercedes there, and I think a couple other foreign brands, but think maybe it's still Toyota. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean that's basically it. As I say, you're not asking the right person. Just like saw something that I missed. Aha, right. Okay. Well, this chap who's calling themselves Black Putin, uh, again, what's happened is he's been influenced by the misinformation of uh, the mainstream media. They didn't actually ban foreigners from entering the beach. If you'd carefully read the reports about it, it was said that Korean people would be able to use it first of all, and then it would be open to foreigners. And I believe it is opening to foreigners in October. Someone has told me, not naming names, someone has told me that they are going there in October. And as it's been correctly pointed out, it's so Korean people can enjoy it first. And I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's, shows that the DPRK is a genuine people first government, because it's allowing ordinary Korean workers from the provinces to actually go and visit it first, instead of wealthy bourgeois tourists from capitalist countries going there and ruining it for everyone. And when I looked at the pictures, I was not only impressed by the quality of the resort and the very high level of development, but the fact that I didn't see any advertising at all. There was, no capitalist commercialism. No McDonald's or anything like that. And I remember, I've been to Rio de Janeiro several times, which, some people might say is a bit like Wonsan in the DPRK. But I remember the beach in Rio de Janeiro, just about every 5 minutes, you had people trying to sell you things on the beach, just about everything. But, the DPRK lacks this kind of commercialism. People can enjoy themselves. But yeah, I mean, it is basically so, Koreans can enjoy themselves. Marshal Kim Jong Un is putting his people first, and foreigners will be will be allowed to visit it later. Right. Yes, indeed. Username: free education, free housing, free healthcare, no taxes. Why do you need to criticize the government? I don't think there's any reason why there weren't Chinese representatives there. If you watched the different events for the 72nd anniversary of victory in the Fatherland Liberation War, you would have seen some Chinese representatives there, and also not from other countries like Vietnam and a few other ones. I mean, I cannot answer that question from Gregor McIntosh. Can't possibly comment. And I think we got to avoid descending to sort of tabloid level. All I can say is, I think years ago I did see Johnny Walker whiskey on sale in the DPRK, but a long time ago. I have not actually seen it on sale in the DPRK for a while. There were other foreign brands of whiskey, but not that particular one. And I myself, I'm not a whiskey fan. Okay, well, we're nearly at the end. Must put the link to the petition about repression in the US. I'm not calling for people to support the ACP or anything like that. We're calling for people to show solidarity against the awful repression that's going on. What are the 5 key achievements of Kim Jong Un? Well, I think there's more than 5 achievements, and it would take all evening and probably all next day to explain them. But let's try to list a few. Firstly, I think it can be said that the DPRK crossed the nuclear finishing line. It became a H-bomb power and an ICBM power. It's made great leaps forward in ICBM technology. Secondly, he's advanced the space program quite a lot. There's been several satellite launches. The DPRK launched its first military reconnaissance satellite nearly 2 years ago, which is a great achievement. There's been great improvements in living standards. There's been a real leap forward in housing construction, not just in Pyongyang, but in the rural areas. And when I visited the DPRK in 2024, I'd never seen so much construction work going on. It was far greater than the other than what I'd seen on the other visits. So I mean that's the third one. I mean, fourthly, there's been the introduction of 12-year compulsory education, which I think is a very significant step forward. Fifth, there's been the emergence of the DPRK as a sports power. They've been winning prizes at different international competitions, and I would sort of add a few other things to the 5 points. I think one of the biggest achievements is that the DPRK has continued along the road of independence, Juche, self-reliance, and socialism without turning back, without abandoning its principles. And also the international position of the DPRK has been increased. Right. So that's 7 points, and I say I could go on, and I was just trying to summarize them. I'm gonna question: how is Kim Jong Un able to be so based? Well, it's I'd say in a few words. It's because he believes in the Juche idea, basically, and he follows in the footsteps of President Kim Il Sung and Chairman Kim Jong Il. Well, what are the sources of Juche? Yeah, I mean, it's basically the texts and speeches of Kim Il Sung, President Kim Il Sung, Chairman Kim Jong Il. To explain the origins and development of the Juche idea would take another live stream. But there's different component sources of Juche, one of which is obviously Marxism-Leninism. I see that Juche was recently renamed Kim Il-sungism. Does it mean the whole teaching is completed and there will be no further changes? No. I think that there may well be, more, future changes. Everything is in a state of development. Well, uh, yes, George, as say, I'll just try and answer this one quickly because I'm going to go very, very soon. Uh, do you mean actually the CPBML, the party founded by Reg Birchall, CPGBML, founded by Harple Bra, and basically there's no connections between the two parties. And as to the late Harple Bra's attitude to the DPRK, he did defend the DPRK. He was president of the Old Society for Friendship with Korea, which I was the vice president of, and he visited the DPRK on several occasions. And I remember meeting him in the DPRK in 2012, 2013. But of course, again, as you say, it's off topic, and I don't really like getting involved in discussions about different parties. But I think CPGBML tend to see Juche as an application of Marxism Leninism to Korea. But yes, I mean, Harpal has visited the DPRK in the past. Right. Okay. Well, just because someone brought up the Malaysia incident, so I'll just share the link to the article I wrote at the time, and then it would be, I think, time. That was the article I wrote at the time about the Malaysia incident, and that article was actually republished by Pravda RU, very prestigious publication. Well, I think Stan has answered that question very well. Marshal Kim Jong Un has criticised himself many times, and internally within the DPRK, there is a lot of criticism goes on, but this is not published externally. Well, I shall conclude with that question about air and water in Pyongyang and London. The air in Pyongyang is much fresher and clearer than in London. In fact, you feel invigorated by it, and even more so when you go up to places like Mount Moyhung. The air is really wonderful there. It's like nothing that I've experienced before. And the water is also so pure. I mean, the water in London, it tastes awful, and it's also so incredibly expensive. So anyway, it's nearly 8:10, so I think we've had a good time. So I will end the stream there, and I'm probably going to be back in another 2 or 3 weeks. So wish everybody a good evening, and long live People's Career, long live the Juche idea. Mansay.